Welcome back, Canonites, for another small Theorycraft video before Christmas. Ever since the reveal of Harbinger, theories have been abound about her species, her role, her motivations, and everything else one could imagine. Even I took a stab at a few ideas here on the channel. While Halo Infinite debunked some of the existing theories, it left things open for plenty more, and today, I have what I believe to be a new one I'd like to share with y'all. Prior to the game's launch, and for much of the time since, I've been pretty against the idea of the Harbinger, and the Endless by extent, being precursors or being of precursor origin in some manner. To me, the precursors work best as enigmatic, godlike beings that mainly operate from the background and whom we almost never definitively see. Even the depictions we have of them aren't meant to be definitive, just one example of what precursors could look like. Giving these beings a definitive form just doesn't sit right with me. However, a recent piece of concept art, some research, and a trip down memory lane have given me a new idea, one I feel could tie the Endless to the precursors without making them precursors. Could the Endless be the last creation of the precursors? To find out, let's start with a dive into some history. Greg Bear's Forerunner saga introduces fans to a number of major concepts and secrets, key among them being the primordial. An ancient being, the primordial was first discovered by the ancient human Sanshayum Empire on the edge of the galaxy and collected for study. Eventually, it was discovered to be a heavily mutated precursor, evolved to survive the passage of deep time. It was both the last precursor and the final creation of the precursors. The primordial is seemingly something of a prototype Gravemind, implied to have been able to control or manipulate the Flood on some level. During ancient humanity's own war against the Flood, they discovered what appeared to be a vaccine against the Flood. While it would require the sacrifice of a full third of the human population at the time, the vaccine beat the parasite back and pushed it out of the galaxy. Sadly, this was revealed to be a feint later on, a ploy to ensure humans wouldn't be wiped out by the Forerunners. If the Forerunners believed humanity to have a cure for the Flood, the Forerunners would inevitably do all they could to ensure the continued survival of the human species, at least for a while. The primordial would go on to fully merge with the Flood, its consciousness now forever part of the universal Flood Hive Mind. The main takeaway here is that at least a small group of precursors planned, to some degree, a vengeance on the Forerunners. Not a simple means of survival, but revenge. This has led to speculation that the precursor dust that eventually gave rise to the Flood, dust said to have degenerated due to the long passage of time, might have been purposefully corrupted. The Flood may have been an intended outcome. This seems to be supported by revelations from the more recent Halo Point of Light. In that book, main character Ryan Forge meets with projections of the Librarian throughout the story, leading to some major lore reveals. Among these was the revelation that a pair of precursors had survived the genocide of their species, taken in by a group of Forerunners who had refused to participate in the egregious act. They sheltered these surviving precursors, but it was ultimately too late. The beings had suffered fatal wounds and, though perfectly capable of healing themselves, decided to let nature run its course and die. I bring all this up to hammer home the point that the precursors aren't some hive mind with a singular thought process. They were a group of individuals. As Point of Light puts it, to understand the Flood, one must understand that the concept of one-mind unity inherent in the Flood was not an aspect inherent in the precursor race as a whole. There was corruption, yes, but there was purity. There was division and unity, inclusion and exclusion. All precursors were not created the same. Just as the last living precursor, the primordial, relished in suffering, so did others celebrate joy. We're almost at the heart of this theory, but there's one more detail I need to go over, and it comes from the final interrogation of the primordial by the Isodidact in Halo Primordium. After recovering the rogue Installation 07 and capturing the primordial, the Isodidact and his human-turned monitor companion Chacus interrogate the being. Among the many revelations it spewed, it mentioned this when the subject of the precursor genocide came up. Those who created you were defied and hunted, the captive said. Most were extinguished. A few fled beyond your reach. Creation continued. Those last two lines have always been a point of contention. I won't dive into all the speculation that's arisen around it, as that's largely irrelevant to today's discussion. The important takeaway here is the bit about creation continuing. This could have a lot of meanings, even potentially referring to the creation of the primordial itself. However, whatever its original intent, it opens a very fascinating door, one which leads to the main question we're asking today. Could the Endless be a final creation of the Precursors? Could it be that a faction of Precursors, knowing of the plans for the primordial and what would become the Flood, tried to create a countermeasure? And could that countermeasure be the Endless? At this point, y'all must be asking, okay, even if this is all true, even if every assumption is accurate, what makes you think the Endless are a Flood countermeasure? Well, it all has to do with a piece of concept art and some research I did for the previous Theorycraft video. Halo Infinite tells us that the Endless are able to withstand the mighty fires of Halo, an impressive feat considering that every other known form of sentient life, and especially sapient life, are hopeless against it. Even the artifacts of the unfathomable and enigmatic Precursors crumble to the Halo effect. So how could the Endless have survived? Mostly just to satiate my own curiosity, I began looking up different types of nervous systems, such as the nerve net used by jellyfish or anemones, among other organisms, or the nerve ring of starfish, to name a couple. I wondered if perhaps a different type of nervous system was what gave the Endless their resistance to the Halos. And then, as if the Precursors themselves were crying out to me, CIA 391 of Halopedia shared this piece of concept art with me. Though unlabeled, the art looks like it's early concepts for the Harbinger or the Skimmers, or beings that eventually became the Harbinger and Skimmers. I'm not going to say that a piece of contextless concept art is definitive proof of anything, but I did find it interesting that ideas I was looking at to explain the Endless's resistance to the Halo effect were reflected, however unintentionally, in the concept art. But after much pussyfooting around, here's the basic idea I have. In the final days or weeks or whatever of the Forerunner genocide against the Precursors, a group of them caught onto a plan that would become the Flood and Primordial. Worried about what this could mean for the diversity of life in the universe, they created a life form that would be immune to the Flood's method of infection, either by giving them a different type of nervous system like I've speculated, or through some other means. Whatever was specifically done, by virtue of making the species immune to the Flood, it also made them immune to Halo. The Halo effect targets an organism's nervous system, the primary means of infection and controlling a host for the Flood, so immunity to one could imply immunity to the other. This would also go towards explaining why the Harbinger directly quotes the Hive Mind in the campaign.
Quiet. I shall talk, and you shall listen.
And certain other oddities like the symbol on Harbinger's headdress, which resembles the Forerunner glyph for Reclaimer. Early Forerunner society was heavily influenced by the Precursors, the Forerunners even said to have served the Precursors directly for a time. It's easy to think that certain glyphs could have been carried over from a literal Precursor language, resulting in a similar symbol appearing on the Harbinger's helmet. Naturally, this could all be coincidence, but 343 usually doesn't make such blatant references without a deeper purpose. Usually. But I think that just about does it for this theory. Could the Endless have been a last measure against the Flood, or might they have a different origin? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or consider jumping over to the Halo Canon Discord to join the conversation there. Regardless of where, however, do share those thoughts and ideas. So, a happy Halo days to all. Be sure to stick around for that Patreon shoutout, and may your holidays be ever merry. First, I'd like to give a big thank you to our Horospis patrons. First, there's Hope, then we have Freight, Discombobulated Sycophant, Justin Montgomery, Man in the Dark, Keisha Dila, Daddy Anarchy, Great Scott Productions, Jumpy Sucks Balls, Lone Ronin 117, Austin Cantrell, and Ever Corrado. Thank you all for your amazing support of the channel. Next, I'd like to thank our theoretical patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or get a direct shoutout, check out patreon.com/halocanon. You can simply support the channel or get additional benefits, such as behind-the-scenes materials, including raw audio for upcoming videos, or even shoutouts like this. All patrons now get early access to certain videos as well, and your Patreon title will appear in the Halo Canon Discord. However, your continued viewership is more than enough for me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. If you really enjoy my stuff, turn on that notification bell so you can be among the first to see new videos when they release. But for all my fellow Canonites, keep on being awesome.